We got called to the Riverside estate last month, one of those wedding venues where everything's white and gold, where the parking lot's full of cars that cost more than my annual salary. Woman collapsed during the ceremony, bride's mother, heart palpitations, they said on the dispatch. But when we got there, it wasn't her heart, it was shock. Because right before she went down, an uninvited guest had stood up during the vows. An older woman in a simple navy dress sitting in the back row, and she'd said 5 words that turned that whole perfect wedding into a crime scene. This wedding is a lie. Let me tell you how this fire really started. Her name was Linda. 62. Lived alone in a small house on Maple Street. Been a widow for 33 years. Raised her son Michael by herself from the time he was 9 years old. I'm not going to tell you about every sacrifice she made. You already know that story. Single mother, 2 jobs, putting her kid first. You've lived it, or you knew someone who has. What you need to know is this. Michael was her whole world, and she thought she was his. 3 months before that wedding, Michael brought his fiancée Victoria home for dinner. Linda had made pot roast, her late husband's recipe, the one she only made for special occasions. She'd set the table with the good plates, the ones with the little blue flowers around the edges. Victoria walked in wearing heels that clicked on the linoleum. Designer bag. Hair perfect. She smiled when she saw Linda, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, extending her hand like they were meeting for a business deal. Linda pulled her into a hug instead, felt Victoria's body go stiff. During dinner, Linda told stories about Michael as a kid, the time he tried to fix her sewing machine and took it apart completely. How he'd bring her dandelions from the yard and call them roses. Victoria laughed at the right times, but her eyes kept drifting to the faded wallpaper, the mended tablecloth, the chipped serving dish. "This roast is lovely," Victoria said. Then, quieter to Michael, "We should probably go. Early morning tomorrow." They'd been there 40 minutes. After they left, Linda stood at the sink washing dishes, her hands in the soapy water, and she replayed that moment. The way Victoria had looked around her house like she was touring a museum of poverty. Michael called the next day, said Victoria loved her, said the wedding would be beautiful, said he couldn't wait for her to be part of the family. Linda held onto those words. The bomb dropped on a Thursday evening in April. Linda was in her garden, cutting roses to bring inside. She heard a car pull up, Michael's car. He didn't come inside, just stood at the garden gate, hands in his pockets. "Mom," he said, "can we talk?" She set down the pruning shears. "Of course, honey. Come in, I'll make coffee." "No, I can't stay long." Something in his voice made her stomach drop. "Victoria and I have been talking about the wedding," he said. He wouldn't look at her, kept his eyes on the roses. "We're keeping it really small, intimate." "That's nice," Linda said slowly. "I don't need a big fuss." Silence. Long enough that a car passed by. Long enough that she heard a dog barking 3 houses down. "How small are we talking?" she asked. Michael's jaw tightened. "Victoria's family they have certain expectations about how things should look. I don't understand. She thinks..." He stopped. Started again. "She thinks it would be better if you didn't come." The world tilted. Linda heard every sound in crystalline clarity, a wind chime on her neighbor's porch, the hum of a lawnmower somewhere, her own heartbeat in her ears. "You mean I'm not invited," she said. Not a question, a statement. "It's not like that," Michael said quickly. "It's just, her family's very traditional, old money. There's politics involved, Mom. Business connections. It's complicated. I'm your mother. I know. I raised you, by myself. I worked 2 jobs so you could go to college. I know, Mom, and I'm grateful, I am. But Victoria's family..." "I don't care about Victoria's family," Linda said. Her voice was steady. eerily calm. "What do you want?" Michael finally looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw something that broke her heart more than the words. He was ashamed. Of her. Of their little house. Of the pot roast dinners and the chipped serving dishes. "I want you to understand," he said. Linda felt something inside her go very quiet. Very still. "Get out of my garden," she said softly. "Mom, get out." He left, and Linda stood there among her roses until the sun went down and the air turned cold. She didn't cry. Not that night. She moved through her house like a ghost, touching things. The photos on the mantel. Michael's baby shoes she'd kept in a box. The sewing machine where she'd made his Halloween costumes every year. Then she went to bed and stared at the ceiling until dawn. For 3 days, she barely ate. She called in sick to her part-time job at the library. She sat in her garden and tried to understand how love could be conditional. On the 4th day, the phone rang. "Linda? It's Henry Peterson." Her late husband's business partner. She hadn't heard his voice in probably 15 years. "Henry," she said, "this is a surprise." "I heard about Michael's wedding," he said. "Congratulations. You must be so proud." Something in her throat tightened. "Yes," she managed. "Very proud." "I was surprised when I heard the bride's name. Victoria Harper. That's Robert Harper's daughter, isn't it?" Linda frowned. Yes, I think so. Why?" Silence on the other end. Then, "Linda, do you remember the embezzlement?" The word hit her like cold water. "That was 30 years ago, Henry." "I know. But Linda, Robert Harper was the employee, the one who stole from the company." The room started spinning. "Your husband had proof," Henry continued. "Documents. Signed confessions. Robert took over $60,000. Your husband could have sent him to prison. But he didn't. He forgave him. Let him repay it quietly and move on. He did it for Harper's family. His kids." Linda's hand tightened on the phone. Victoria was one of those kids. "Yes." After she hung up, Linda sat very still. Then she stood up and walked to the attic. The boxes were covered in dust, old files from her husband's company. She'd kept them when she should have thrown them out. Some part of her, unable to let go of him completely. It took an hour, but she found it. Settlement papers, dated 1992, Robert Harper's signature at the bottom, a confession letter, handwritten. "I deeply regret my actions and the harm I've caused to you and your family. Payment receipts, over 5 years, every month, until the debt was paid." Linda spread the papers on the attic floor. And suddenly, everything made sense. Victoria's coldness wasn't random. It was inherited. Her father had been humiliated by Linda's husband, forced to admit his theft, made to pay it back while his wife and daughter knew what he'd done. And now, 30 years later, his daughter had found the perfect revenge. Marry the son. Exclude the mother. Erase her from the family like she never mattered. Linda gathered the papers carefully, put them in a manila envelope. And for the first time in 4 days, she felt something other than grief. She felt clarity. The morning of the wedding was gray, rain threatening but not falling. Linda stood in front of her mirror wearing that navy dress, the one she'd worn to her husband's funeral. It still fit. She picked up the envelope, looked at her reflection. "I'm not doing this for revenge," she said out loud to the empty room. "I'm doing this for the truth." Then she drove to the Riverside estate. The wedding venue was stunning. White roses everywhere, candles flickering in crystal holders, a string quartet playing something soft and elegant. Linda slipped in through the side entrance, took a seat in the very last row. She placed the envelope on her lap and folded her hands over it. When Michael walked in with the groomsmen, he looked nervous, happy but nervous. He was laughing at something one of his friends said. Then he turned his head and saw her. His face went white, actually white. He stopped walking. His friend bumped into him. Michael leaned over to Victoria, who was standing at the side in her white dress, laughing with her bridesmaids. He whispered something. She turned. The look Victoria gave Linda could have frozen fire. Victoria's mother, dripping in diamonds, followed her daughter's gaze. Her smile vanished. She leaned over to her husband. Robert Harper. He was older now. Gray hair, expensive suit. But when his eyes found Linda, something passed across his face. Recognition and fear. Linda met his gaze and didn't blink. The ceremony began. Linda barely heard the processional music. She watched Michael stand at the altar, his hands clasped in front of him. He kept glancing back at her. Victoria stood beside him, rigid and perfect. The priest's voice echoed through the hall. Dearly beloved. Linda's fingers traced the edge of the envelope. Marriage is a sacred bond, built on truth, trust, and love. She thought about Michael at 9 years old, crawling into her bed after nightmares, asking why his daddy had to die. A commitment not just between two people, but between two families. She thought about the pot roast dinners, the mended jeans, the night shifts. If anyone here knows any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, this was it, the moment. Speak now, or forever hold your peace. The silence was absolute. Linda stood up. The sound of her chair scraping back echoed like a gunshot. Every head turned, the priest's eyes went wide. Michael looked like he might be sick. I do, Linda said. Her voice was steady, clear. I know a reason. Mom, please. Michael's voice cracked. Please don't do this. Victoria grabbed his arm. Security, she hissed to someone. But Linda was already talking. My name is Linda Patterson, she said to the room, to the guests in their expensive clothes. I'm Michael's mother. I wasn't invited to this wedding. Victoria decided I wasn't good enough to be here. Murmurs spread through the crowd. But I came anyway, because this wedding is built on a lie. She held up the envelope. 33 years ago, Victoria's father stole money from my late husband's company. Over $60,000. My husband caught him. Had proof. Could have sent him to prison. Robert Harper stood up. This is slander. Then explain these, Linda said, pulling out the documents. Her hands were steady. Your signature, your confession, your apology letter. She walked forward down the aisle, slowly, every eye on her. My husband showed you mercy, Mr. Harper. He let you repay the debt quietly. He protected your family from scandal. He did it so your children wouldn't suffer for your mistakes. She stopped in front of the altar, looked at Victoria. And this is how your daughter repays that kindness. By marrying my son and erasing me from his life. Victoria's perfect composure shattered. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Linda said. You were ashamed of your father, and you took it out on me. She turned to Michael, her son, who was standing there with tears streaming down his face. I raised you to be better than this, she said quietly. I thought I taught you that love isn't about money or status, that family isn't something you're ashamed of. Mom, he whispered. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are, sweetheart, but sorry isn't enough right now. She handed him the envelope. These are yours. Maybe you'll understand someday why I couldn't stay silent. Behind her, chaos erupted. Victoria's mother was shouting. Robert Harper was trying to grab the documents. Guests were pulling out their phones. The priest looked completely lost. And that's when Victoria's mother collapsed. My partner and I got her on oxygen, got her vitals stable, panic attack mostly. The shock of public humiliation will do that. While we worked, I watched Linda. She was standing in the parking lot, rain finally starting to fall, just standing there, arms wrapped around herself. Michael came out, walked up to her slowly. They didn't hug, but they talked, for a long time. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw his shoulders shaking, saw her hand reach out and touch his face just once. When we were packing up the rig, I saw them get into his car together. Him in his tuxedo, her in her navy dress. They drove away. I ran into Linda about 2 months ago at the farmer's market. She was buying flowers. Lots of them. "How are you, Mrs. Patterson?" I asked. She smiled. A real one. "I'm good, Dean. Really good. And Michael? We're working on it. He moved closer. Comes by for dinner on Sundays. We don't talk about the wedding." "And Victoria?" Linda's smile turned sad. "Gone. Called off the engagement 3 days after. Michael said she couldn't handle the shame. Her family couldn't either." She held up a bouquet of sunflowers. "I'm opening a flower shop, actually. Something I always wanted to do but never had time for. Michael's helping me renovate the space." "That's wonderful." "It is," she said. "It really is. I've been fighting fires for 18 years, and I've learned that some fires need to burn, not to destroy, but to clear out what's dead and rotting, to make room for new growth." Linda's truth was buried for 30 years, under shame and silence. But buried things don't stay buried forever. They either rot in the darkness or break through the soil. Linda chose to break through. If someone's trying to bury you, remember this. Check what you're planted in. Is it grave dirt or garden soil? Because you might not be buried. You might be planted. Stay safe out there.